So one of my favorite PlayStation memories is actually my earliest one, and it's when I got a PS1 for Christmas in 1997. First game I got was the original Resident Evil. I was a big horror fan of horror movies, but I never actually played a game that scared me. 10 minutes into that game, I'm walking down a hallway, I think everything's going fine, and then a dog jumps through the window, and I was terrified. I wanted to cry, I wanted to leave. The last thing I wanted to do was turn the game off because it's still one of my favorites to this very day.
When I first got my first console, the PlayStation 1, and I played Crash Bandicoot all night on it, it was amazing, but then halfway through we realized that we didn't have a memory card to save our game. So we had to go the next day to Canadian Tire and buy a memory card and start the game all the way from the start.
Easily my favorite PlayStation 2 memory is Grand Theft Auto 3 because it's what made me buy the system.
Back in the day when I first saw PlayStation, I thought, ew, gross, loading times, who wants that? CDs are stupid. But then came Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, the most sublime 2D platformer I'd ever touched. And when I reached that pivotal ending moment and discovered that in fact the game wasn't over, it wasn't even half over, and a second inverted castle appeared in the sky, my brain went and I was a PlayStation fan forever after.
My favorite PlayStation memory is definitely the opening to Final Fantasy VIII. To this day, it still gives me chills, like the way the camera flies across this flower-strewn field and you see Safer and Squall battling it out during a storm, and the music of Liberi Fatali, which is Uematsu's best composition in my opinion. I still think it's the greatest opening to any video game of all time, and that is by far my favorite PlayStation memory.
So I made some of my greatest and lifelong friends playing Final Fantasy VII over and over and over again every weekend for probably about a year. So thank you, PlayStation.
So when the PSP came out, my ex-girlfriend at the time bought me one, and she also got the warranty, so if something happened to it, I could return it within 2 weeks and get a brand new PSP. But I wouldn't need that to happen because I take good care of my stuff, right? Wrong. PSP came with this little sleeve, it was like a sock. And I was holding it, I was showing to my friend that this thing is supposed to keep your PSP safe. Instead, it flew out of my hand and hit an exposed pipe in my parents' basement and shattered into a billion pieces. I shoved all the pieces back together, but the screen looked like a spider web. At the time, people were talking about how some PSPs had dead pixels. So I brought it back to popular video game chain store, GameStop, to the new lady who was just working there at the time, and I said, I feel like my PSP has a few dead pixels. She opened it up, noticed the screen was covered in cracks, and said, oh yes, those are quite a few dead pixels. She returned it for free on the spot, and it was a great system.
My favorite Sony memory happens to be the first one I have of the console back in '95 when I went to my friend's house because they bought a new PlayStation, and we played a little game called Twisted Metal. Turns out it's one of the funnest games I've ever played. It taught me a lot about being a console fan in general. Whether you like Nintendo or Sony, you can all get along, except in this t-shirt.
So the Metal Gear Solid series is definitely one of my favorite game series ever, basically. It's cool. At the beginning of that game, you do this thing where you name your file. And it's the kind of most like sort of throwaway, forgettable thing. And you know, we were teenagers, so he named the file Funky Chimp Sex. Now, spoilers, the thing happens at the end of the game where there's this very dramatic cutscene, and then a pair of dog tags is held out, and you see the name of your file. So, in the midst of all of this gravitas and Kojima-esque dialogue, it's just like, this is just one more soldier. And that soldier's name was Funky Chimp Sex.
I was actually going to vacation on Hawaii. I did not want to miss playing Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which happened to come out around the same time. So I got my Slim, I got my San Andreas, I took it to Hawaii with me. When my wife was asleep at night, I was playing San Andreas, I was a happy camper, enjoyed the beach, enjoyed the games, keep on gaming, great system, loved it.
My favorite PlayStation memory is a tale of revenge. I'd just gotten into a fight with my stepbrother. I don't remember what it was, we were really young, it was probably dumb. And he was playing SmackDown Shut Your Mouth on PS2. And there was a second controller plugged into the PS2. And if you hit the start button, it didn't make a noise like player 2 has joined. It was like a really subtle switch from CPU to player 2. So whenever his most hated wrestler, The Undertaker, would come into the ring, I would just subtly hit start and just destroy him because I was way better. And he just got enraged because he was constantly losing to The Undertaker over and over and over again. He never found out. To this day, I haven't told him, and it was so sweet.
One of my fondest PlayStation memories is when I first got my PlayStation 2 because it was the first console I bought for myself. And I bought Kingdom Hearts with it. And it's the first game that made me cry, and it's the game that forever will be my favorite.
When I first got a PlayStation 1, we rented Metal Gear Solid, me and my best friend, and we stayed up all night playing it. We got so far through the game, and we got right up until Revolver Ocelot's torture table. And I remember going into it, they were like, there are no continues this time. And we've been playing for like 10, 12 hours, and we died, and we didn't have a memory card. And so it's like 3 in the morning. We sat there and we're just like, is that it? Is that the end of the game? Do we start over? Nope, we had to start the whole thing over again. And we did. And we beat him, and we beat the game, and it was the best.
I played Suikoden 2, one of my favorite JRPGs of all time, in one weekend. It was life-changing. I didn't know stories could be that good. It's a really good game, and it's just kind of stuck with me. But the video store I rented it from was closing, and they decided they were going to throw that game in the trash instead of sell it to me. I offered them money, and they said, no, we're going to just, recycle it. It's going to go in the garbage. And I said, all right. So I stole it.
My favorite PlayStation memory has to be Final Fantasy Tactics. I mean, this was a game that on the heels of Final Fantasy VII's big production value, like crazy scale RPG, sort of toned things down, at least on a production standpoint, but was one of the deepest games I had ever played. I was never really exposed to strategy games. And so the opportunity to sort of go through a Final Fantasy story, level up characters using the job system, and uncover the truth or a hidden truth in the world of Ivalice was a really cool opportunity.